We now take you to the broadcast of It's Time with Reverend Nathaniel W. Martin. Here's Reverend Martin.
Thank you, Dr. Blackwell. And let me say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, certainly never good night, and never ever goodbye. I hope everybody had a beautiful Thanksgiving, albeit we may not have had quite as many folks over to the house. I was talking to a friend of mine not too long ago. I said, well, we've seen both sides of the food issue now. We know how it feels to not have enough food, to be food deprived, and then we also know how it feels when you get too much food. So the Lord has let us look at both sides of that issue. We know how much it is, amen, to be able to skip a meal. Some of us eating so much. Thank to God, however, to see you on this afternoon or tonight or whenever you are having the opportunity and the pleasure and convenience of viewing this offering, as we call it. This presentation is called It's Time, and it's always time for social justice. Social justice, as we define it, must always involve environmental and the economic. Environmental because of places like Flint, Michigan, and so many other thousands of conditions and circumstances where black people have been forced to live only to have the ruling city authorities bulldoze the town, the city, the community, the area, the neighborhood, to make way for various civic projects such as museums and auditoriums and freeways and bridges and the like. So we need to look at all of the ways in which our environment has impacted us. I always think about the case of Breonna Taylor. Breonna Taylor was sleeping in her bed, but as the sociologists call it, the proximate and the distal environment imposed upon her. She didn't know anything about a judge signing a no-knock warrant, but that judge signed a no-knock warrant, and that resulted in her death, although she had nothing to do with what the police officers were given the warrant to look for. She was neither the subject of it, neither was she advised of it. And so your environment continues to impact you, whether you want to realize it or actualize it or recognize it or not. And a lot of times the environment is beyond our control, which is what I want to stress. But it is in the control of somebody. It's in control of the city fathers, the people who make the laws, the people who sign the warrants, the people who sit on the various committees, boards, and commissions, and chambers of commerce all across this great land. So yes, we must always have a social justice issue that looks at the impact, how we have been adversely impacted by the environment in which we are compelled and yea forced to live. Also, the economic component must never be overlooked because of the fact that we live in under a capitalistic system, and that capitalistic system has run roughshod not only over the formerly enslaved, but also over the peoples of the entire world, where capitalism has put down its roots, its fangs, and its cruel hand. And so you can see that I have an activist point of view of the way things are in our nation and in our world at this time. However, as Dr. King said, and as so many others have said, it's a beautiful struggle. And while we don't, as King said, we don't become grim or desperate, but we find ourselves aspiring to the challenge, to not only to see the challenge, but to embrace the struggle and to overcome or to surmount the obstacles. In his testimony of hope, which was the final essay, a final sermon that he was preparing to deliver prior to his untimely assassination by the system. I'm going to read for you at this present from our reparations text, and then we shall have a brief look at some of the things that are happening in education. Deuteronomy chapter 15, picking up the reading at verse 12, record these words of God speaking to the children of Israel. And if thy brother, an Hebrew man or an Hebrew woman, be sold unto thee, and serve thee 6 years, then in the 7th year thou shalt let him or her in this manner go free from thee. And when thou sendest them out free from thee, thou shalt not let them go away empty. Thou shalt thoroughly furnish him or her out of thy flock, and out of thy floor, and out of thy winepress, of that wherewith the Lord thy God hath blessed thee, thou shalt give unto them. Emphasis on the word give, not rent, not lease, not sell. Give was the emphasis that God placed upon how a nation was to treat its downtrodden when it would help them to pull themselves up. Inasmuch as they had served in a slave position for 6 years, they were not to be kept in that position beyond 7 years, according to the Hebrew and Jewish teachings of the law. And when it was time for them to go, you were not to just turn them out. That was the problem with the ruling establishment as it in regards to slavery, or the end thereof, here in the United States. Yes, they had fought a bitter civil war to end slavery, but when it come time to set slaves free, they just turn them out. Like you turn a horse or a cow loose, but worse than a horse or a cow, because a horse or a cow would have pasture and water and a stall to go in, but the poor slave who started with nothing, he had nothing when it was all over. 246 years as unrequited toil, and turned loose without getting paid, without any reckoning of the years of labor of not only the parents, but of the family parents who had labored prior to that, going all the way back to at least the 1619 landing of the ship, the White Lion, in Virginia. All of that labor, all of those work hours left on the table, unpaid, unrecognized, or for the most part just wiped off the books. You work 246 years, but you don't get paid for none of it. No, that's not justice. That's not equity, and that's not starting equal. You can't start equal if you got my money and you don't pay me my money. Because you got my money, then you ought to pay. If a person have worked for you the equivalent of 246 years worth of hours, and those were slave hours, not 8 hours, but slave hours, well, that is a great debt that has to be reckoned with. This cannot be pushed off the books as though you worked at Goldman Sachs. Now, look at the writing of our educational system, our curriculums. It is appalling. It is appalling. In these days and times, looks like they've given up on education in America. Yes, given up on education in America. For instance, in 1988, between 1988 and 1998, the New York State built more prisons than they built universities. They spent, according to this writer, $761 million in building new prisons, but they only spent 615. Their expenditures for universities declined by 615 years. I was almost to make a comparison of Marvel equivalents, but there was no comparison, because while they were spending $761 million on building new prisons in the 10 years from 1988 to 1998, they were at the same time reducing and decreasing the expenditures for universities by $615 million. Leading one writer to say, paraphrasing W.B. Du Bois, that this is the education. This is education in the 21st century. This is education in the 21st century. This is modern and exact social science. This is the university course in History 12. And this is what we have inherited from the original edifice designed and constructed by the white architects of education. We've given up on educating the masses. We've given up on educating the great unwashed. They've given up on educating black children. They've given up on educating brown children. They've given up on educating the society, period. You see it in the construction, as they say, of the construction boom in prison building and jail bending and 3 strikes and you're out and all of that type of thing. We must realize and we must recognize and acknowledge that, as one of the educators said some time ago, let me try to turn to that right here, it is, said education can be used both to oppress and to liberate. Remember, the Bible says you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Also says in the book of Proverbs, train up a child in the way that he or she should go, and when they are old, they will not depart from it. Now, there got to be some correct training. One cannot just say knowledge, general knowledge goes to everybody, because in this nation we know that knowledge has been repressed and suppressed and hidden. How do we know that, Reverend Martin? Why? Because according to the historians and the sociologists that are looking at American culture, the United States culture, United States history, without a biased eye, but with a more objective look at it. It says that we know that the early slaves felt that education was very important, but that there was a question asked of who should be included in education, and it is said that those that were in charge recognized the value of education, and that's why they passed laws that said that it was illegal to teach a enslaved person to become literate. He was not a slave person was not to enter into what was known as the literate culture. That means the culture of those that had learned to read, learned to study, learned to reason, and learned to think critically. He said because that would make that person unfit to be a slave if once they became educated. All right. So then that lets you know right off the bat that there is a political component and a political interest in education or schooling, and who is being schooled, and what are they being schooled in. That was a great debate held early in the last century, actually beginning after the end of the Civil War between W.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, as to whether it was right to let a person have what was known then as an enlightened education, a higher education, or to train them. Was it better for the Negro to be trained vocationally? That's why we have so many A&M colleges. A&M mean agriculture and mechanical. They had agriculture and mechanical schools all across this country that began to pop up. A lot of my folks went to Prairie View, A&M, agriculture and mechanical. Originally Florida, A&M, agriculture and mechanical, and you can go across the major states, and you find the A&M model, and you find the normal school model. And what it was designed for was to teach Negroes to work with their hands, not with their mind, work with their hands. And that was one of the great debates, some said, between Dr. Du Bois and Dr. Washington. But of course, those two were really minor players in the bigger picture, because it was the society at large that was determining who was going to be taught, what was going to be taught, what were they going to allow to be taught, and what were you going to school for? Now, if you're going to school to get a job, all right, now we're going to train you to work on this job. We're going to train you to be what? Compliant, to be compliant. And that means you're going to learn how to do some type of industrial labor, some type of industrial, perform some type of industrial operation mechanically over and over. And that would be how you spent your life. So when you come out of school, the larger society know you have been trained to work in this job, all right? You ain't trained to think higher. You're not trained to think critically, but you've been to school. And that is what all of us must now confront. What do we get out of going to these schools? What do our children learn about going to these schools? They certainly were not learning their culture. They were not learning the truth when they come home and tell you Columbus was a hero, and Santa Claus is real, and Jesus is white. That's not the truth. Why, those things are all myths. And therefore, one asks the question, who is benefiting by the miseducation of not only the Negro, but of many of our other brothers and sisters of various nationalities who are now entering or have entered, and some frankly have finished education in the formal sense. But what are they educated for? And as we look at the condition of the economy in the year 2020, even before the pandemic, jobs, they've been talking about the end of work since the 1990s. I got a book on my shelf written by a political pundit, a political analyst, which he references and writes a whole book about the end of work. So the work out there that was is no longer there. So what is the value of this education? What are we training people? What are we teaching people in these schools? When you go to school, when you send the black child to school, what are they being taught? When you send the white child or any of the other of the various nationalities or cultures, remember there's no, one thing we learned from education, we have finally, as a result of cracking the DNA helix, as I always make mention, I continue to make mention, soon one day somebody gonna pay attention, is that in nature, contrary to how we were originally taught in school under Darwinism, Fabian Darwinism, and all of that stuff, come to find out there's no such thing as race occurring in nature, that you can find the same DNA and cells in a person in Europe that you would find in a person in Africa. And you would find in Africa the same DNA and cells and all of that genome in a person in the continent of Africa who had never been to the continent of Europe, mind you. You would find the very same DNA. Yes, the same DNA. So that means that there is no, in other words, in nature, you cannot find a European gene. You cannot find a white gene. In Africa, you cannot find a black gene, or none of that stuff. All of those categories are human construct. Therefore, they are political concepts that have been imposed upon humanity. And I don't know about you, but when I was going to school, I wasn't taught that. I was taught race. You had black folks, you had white folk. White folk was superior, black folk was inferior. How was that? Because of some curse of Ham way back in the scriptures. Now when you go and study theology, you can find out that that was a lie. So my brothers and my sisters, we have to question who is doing the teaching and what is the curriculum and what is the aim of that curriculum. That is why the Jewish child went to public school, and then when he came home, he did another 4 hours every day, learn his own culture. And that is where I feel that we must put our emphasis in two places. We must see that the curriculum in the schools improves, and we must also very stringently affirm our culture and our experience and our history and our education and our knowledge upon our children when they are at home, so that they do not come up with a suspect education. You may have a master's degree, a bachelor of science degree, or even go all the way up to the philosophy, a doctorate of philosophy in your chosen field. But what is the applicable worth or significance of that degree or of that diploma? And I think as we look at the various stratagems and schemes that have been applied in on the school boards to keep our children from getting a good education. First, they kept them on the bus as long as it's going past the white school. And then after we began to desegregate, they decided, well, no, busing was wrong. We don't want to put kids on the bus. Why should our kids be on the bus? I know right here in Los Angeles we had a coalition called Bus Stop, headed up by Bobby Fiedler. And it was to stop the buses from busing our children all the way out there and don't bring no white kids down here to Fremont High School. That was a no-no. And so we have to really question, where is our tax money going? What are we spending our tax money for? And what is the reward? You know, we know something is being taught, but who is getting the teaching? Who is getting the advantage of this cultural education, being educated in letters? You know, one of the best things that you can learn, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many people, of course, because history bears it out. If you learn to read, you learn to write, you learn your arithmetic. But most of all, you learn to begin to think, to question, to ask questions, and to think critically. A lot of folks don't think critically. They can read, but they can't think critically. A lot of folks can read and can't comprehend what they just got through reading. You must not only read about it, you got to sit down and think about what you read and what is this application and how does it apply in your day, in your condition, in your situation. That's one of the first things they teach you when you go to theological school. You got to make the sermon apply to the day-to-day person sitting in the pew. You just can't be preaching up in the ivory tower. You got to preach so that Aunt Gussie can understand what you're talking about. And you got to put some gravy on that dry bread, as they say. And that means you got to make it understandable to all levels of so-called education. And so these are some of the preliminary thoughts that we are talking about when we discuss education. Education can be very, very boring, or education can be very, very exciting. The purpose, like I said, what is the purpose of education? or what is the purpose of schooling? When you got kids in school, what are they in there for? What are you teaching those children in that school? What are they learning in that school? How is it going to translate into usable ability or knowledge or skill? How does it help them to earn a living? How does it help them to associate and socialize in the larger society with everybody else? How does it help them to get a job or an interview or to fill out an application, all these type of things? And so we have a lot of questions that we need to address ourselves to because of the fact that we see that recently, within the last, I think, 8 years, it's come out ruling from the Supreme Court and state courts that said the education system was not set up to guarantee, was not mandated to give your child a good education. Well, now if I'm sending him to school, I hope he's getting a good education. Otherwise, what am I sending them for? You know. But these state courts, especially state courts in southern states like Mississippi, but other jurisdictions as well, have ruled that just because you send your child to school doesn't mean that child's going to get educated, and that no school system is mandated to see that your child gets a good education. You know, they always throw the question, what is a good education? What is education? And so as we come to the end of the year, you need to be thinking about these type of things. I'm reading at present a book called The White Architects of Black Education. I hope you can see that. White Architects, hold that down, of Black Education. You see that name? William H. Watkins. Of course, there are a lot of people who wrote on black education. But I'm putting this up here because it stands to reason that your oppressor, those that oppress you, do not really want you to know much about yourself. As we are wrapping up, we want you to continue to pray for all of our doctors, nurses, medical staff, medical people. Pray much for each other. Pray that we will soon have a viable vaccine, a workable vaccine, and we shall be able to put this nation back to normal as far as our health care, so we can go back to dealing with the normal bête noirs and bugaboos that oppress us, all right? And for my brothers and my sisters that labor in these jobs where they don't want you to have a full-time position, they only want to work you part-time. They'll give you 32 hours, but they won't give you that last 8, so you can have 40. They want you to be on call at home all the time, but never tell you when they're going to call you. And you're always on pants and you can't go out and get a better job because you're waiting on this job. Those people don't want to pay you. Those people don't want to pay you. I'm going to tell you now, as it comes down to the end of the year, going to the next year, if people don't want to pay you, don't work for them. God bless you. Thank you, Doc. We out of here.
Thank you, Lord. Some good days, and I've had some hills to climb. I've had some weary days, and some sleepless nights. But when I look around and I think things over, all of my good days, outweigh my bad days, yes they do.
Outweigh my bad days.
I just say thank you, Lord.
Thank